Greetings and bienvenue, midnight crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
I haven't found anything but have had things happen. Here is one story. Me, 18 at the time. Decide to go to the family cabin in the woods. It's winter break and I'm planning a getaway. No media, just a cell phone for emergencies. This is the first time I really was on my own. So school ends, I load my truck and I'm off. It took me a while to get to the nearest town there, but it was worth it as I met up with an old family friend. My destination was maintained by a nice guy from a local town who did this as a line of work. I paid him a visit to send regards from my family, and he was impressed. I decided to go on my own the way I planned to do. His praise immediately turned to concern, though almost as if something was inevitable.
Anon, I'm glad you decided to live with the land for a bit. But be careful. These woods have dangers in them.
My father told me about the bears and wolves.
No, something sinister.
Sure, I responded. My dad told me about the spooky stuff. My dad was a bit of a joker, almost malicious at times. Nothing was off limits to him, including sending his son off with stories one would only assume Hollywood could conjure up. Immediately assume they are in on it and end the conversation. It was great seeing you. Always a pleasure. Once again, thank you for your wonderful work. After about 30 minutes of just catching up, I decided it was best to hit the road. I had a bit of a way to go, and a storm was due to roll in. As I said my goodbyes, he just left me with some advice.
Anon, please, I am not joking with these stories. Please be safe. These woods play tricks.
I departed. After about an hour of driving the winding, scenic, endless roads, I arrived at the old family cabin. Truly breathtaking. An unmolested piece of earth, crafted from the things you could only see in the best of pastoral artwork. Only I was that little character in that painting. I was alone. The cabin needed very little. It was maintained very well. Basically just minor sweeping was all I needed to do, a testament of our friends' hard work. I unpacked my truck and loaded all that was needed into the cabin, and I was set. It was pretty much near dark at this point, and I had been traveling for a long while, so I decided to get a fire going and watch the snow from the storm that had just started kicking in. I threw some beans and hot dogs on the fire. I even managed to sneak a bottle of scotch, which wasn't like anything I thought it would be, but I pretended to like it for the time being. I lit my cigarette and enjoyed the views. Life was good. Soon enough I found my belly full and my head nodding. It was time for sleep. I awoke to the ground covered in snow. It was great. It was this pure white snow, almost like baby powder. Where I'm from, it's usually yellow from dog piss. Hell, maybe even the occasional turd from some carless dog owner. I walked about the cabin to the rear, which faced what my father would call the outlook. The outlook was just a cliff, and if you were daring enough to look down, all you could see were pine trees till what seemed like the horizon. I decided to do what most would do and go exploring. I remember endless summer days of running around the woods and having adventures as a child, so I decided to do the same. It was challenging trudging through the snow. I had underestimated the energy needed to do such a thing and quickly found myself both lost and tired. I decided it was time to head back. Luckily for me, I had lit a fire before leaving the cabin and had much warmth to look forward to. If only I could find my way back. I decided to follow my footsteps back, but quickly realized that some of them had been covered by the wind. It wasn't too difficult though. They would end. I would look around and find some more and follow those. This worked great until I made this unexplainable discovery. I reached a point where it seemed that two paths had been taken. I saw my path and another one, which seemed to mimic my own path, but it diverted at a point. Was somebody following me, or did they come after and go another way? My father always said there was not a cabin for miles. Could this be a lost hiker or hunter? I decided to follow the unfamiliar path. Stupid of course, but I was younger then. They weren't kidding when they said you don't develop till 25. After what seemed like hours of following these footsteps, they just vanished. I quickly backtracked and made it back to the cabin. I made my dinner and quickly fell asleep. The next few days were the same. I couldn't find the footsteps again. About a week had passed at this point and we were expecting a massive storm. It was due to hit in a day or so. I still had some time to screw around. I wanted to get the ultimate cabin storm experience, complete with raging fire, massive portions of food, a pie and decent amounts of alcohol and cigarettes. It was going to be the grand finale of my trip. I set off for the day to get some firewood and pick some berries from a nearby patch. We had planted it when I was a kid and I wanted to see what it had produced. It was bountiful to say the least. Something about fresh, natural, untouched food. They tasted sweeter than anything I have ever had. I head back to the cabin. As I'm walking, I hear shit behind me, not like the wind, and not that sound everyone talks about like, hew hew hew, something's behind us. Somebody, not something, was behind me, but where? They could be hiding behind anything, any tree, any bush, any rock. I call out to them, "This is private land, who are you?" No answer. I call out, "I am armed, come out." Nothing. I hear a scurrying sound and then silence again. I figure to myself, it was probably an animal and head back to my place. As I was heading to my place, I could see our old family friend standing in the front of the cabin. I still hear a faint sound behind me but shrug it off as an animal at this point. I call out to him, "Hey, what brings you up here?" He tells me about the storm, and how I should come into town. It's going to be way too big for me to handle, and that they thrive in storms. Who is they? I ask.
No time for stories. We have to board up now, and get you out of here.
Clearly, he was worried about it still being daylight for the drive into town. I told him I'm staying. He tried to convince me, but he was under a time restraint. He had a few homes to watch over and he was in no mood for stories and or me lagging around. He left me with good luck and a sat phone. I said no electronics, remembering in the most pretentious 18-year-old manner I could muster up, truly something Holden would say. He told me to
shut the fuck up and quit being a stupid kid. Don't be a fucking moron, kid. You're not shit out here. This whole finding your way shit is all bullshit. Call me if you need me.
He got into his truck and sped off. I was honestly hurt. Like levels of hurt I can't explain. There I was thinking I was this manly man, camping by myself, all alone. I was truly taken down a notch. I was in a shit mood for the rest of the night. I hastily made my dumb berry pie. I cooked my stupid beans and whatever. I quickly scarfed that down to get drunk and cigarette myself to oblivion. The storm was big. Truly he was not joking about that. I saw his concern with me after a few or 10 drinks, and started to fade. I don't know how long I was out for, but all I heard when I woke was a piercing wind howling, and then came the bang. Somebody, something, was at the cabin door. I stumbled to the nearest window and peeked out. It was my family friend. He was completely naked and looked almost blue. Holy shit, what happened? I think I need to fucking help him. I bang on the window and yell out to him, "Hold on, I'm coming to get you." I rush to the door, tripping over my own drunken self. I swing the door open and tell him to get in. Snow is rushing in. I say it again. Get in. Nothing. I tried to pull him in. He's ice cold. Not like I'm naked and out in the cold, like a stone, like a cold I can't even explain. I freak out at this point because he's just waving his hands around and moving his mouth up and down, like he's having a conversation. His movements are furtive, not natural, and almost like mocking something. I'm not sure if it's because I was drunk, but they looked familiar. It looked like he was mocking himself from earlier. I rush to the sat phone, thinking maybe I'll call his wife. I called the number I remembered as a kid and thankfully I reached someone. Feminon, friend Anon is here, he won't respond, he's acting weird. Before I could finish I realized it wasn't his wife on the phone, but him. He calmly talks to me.
Walk to the door real slow, like nothing is going on, and just close it, real nice and slow, like everything is okay. Do you understand?
Yes.
Go do it.
I walk to the door, just like he said. I reach out to the door and close it, but these movements give me the jumps and I end up slamming in a bit. The door shakes for a bit and I rush to the furthest place from it. It's literally shaking off the hinges at this point. Then it stops, and I hear the loudest yell I have ever heard. Animal-like and a rip. Then silence. I rush to the phone, tell him what happened, and he says hold on for an hour. He just hangs up. Next thing I remember is him and his wife waking me up on the floor of the cabin. They are both dressed in big-ass Arctic-like parkas. They were able to drive up using his old tracked vehicle thing. I drunkenly asked him, was that what you were talking about?
Yep.
I ask what it was. He says he has no idea, so he calls it the thing. Ya know, like in the movie Kid, making sure to reference the one from the 80s and not that new CGI shit one. I passed out and woke up in the guest room of the house they owned. My truck and all my shit was nicely packed in the back, and that was the last time I went up to that cabin.
I have some real experiences I've had. This all took place in my childhood home in a small town in central Illinois around the turn of the century. Lying down on the couch covered up and watching television. I was a young kid at the time, maybe around 10 or 11. Pretty comfy at that moment. Nobody else was in the living room with me except what I thought was our dog at the foot of the couch I was on. All of a sudden the couch starts shaking back and forth as if the dog is scratching herself and her leg keeps hitting the couch cushion. I shrug it off, tell the dog to knock it off. Look down, the dog isn't there. Realize even at my young age that the dog physically could not have been on any other side of the couch to do that. WTF bells are going off in my baby brain. Uncomfortable the rest of the night, too afraid to get off the couch and sleep there. Around the same year of the previous story. Sitting on the same couch while home alone on a weekend, parents are out. It was around noon during summer and the living room was basking in the warm sunlight coming in through the windows, primarily the window behind my dad's recliner in the corner of the room. I was feeling good. Watching TV. The AC was blowing on me too much and making me cold, so I reached for a blanket. I see in my peripheral vision a ghostly white figure sitting in my dad's recliner next to the couch I'm on. I can describe it as somewhat transparent, its form, primarily the head, being illuminated by the sunlight coming in from the window behind it. It very clearly looks like a figure of a person sitting there, from head to toe, stoic in nature and facing the direction of the TV. It appears as if it were made of dust particles cascading in front of the light. I quietly got up and hauled ass to the kitchen, and then to my room, which was directly on the other side of the living room wall. Sat uncomfortably on the computer while I waited patiently for my parents to come home. The house was built sometime in the very late 1800s. Also, one time I found what I assumed to be an old wooden casket just barely sticking out of the descending hill leading to an alley from my backyard. It was just on the property line, like right on it. I never fucked with it, but my parents told me all the time how there were old, mostly unmarked cemeteries from the 17 and 1800s in the woods surrounding the neighborhoods around us. Personally, I don't want to give away too many details because I am a very paranoid person. Sorry. Generally, I accept that there are paranormal unknowns we do not fully understand. A lot of weird shit happened to me in that house, but these are the headliner stories.
I used to work for the owner of a couple Miami strip clubs from 06-12. Work for is the wrong word. He was like my father. He was a friend of my father's, and when my father went to prison, he took me under his wing. I was initially just doing yard work in his house after a hurricane, but soon after I got my license, I was driving strippers to and from work, driving my boss around Miami, and occasionally accompanying him to drug deals. Toward 09 I was my boss's assistant, helping him with his strip clubs, and he started promoting regular nightclubs too. My mom didn't approve, but she didn't work, and I was bringing money into the house. This went on for a few years. It was chill. I started selling drugs myself. I was banging strippers on a regular basis. I was living life. I had dropped out of high school but was making more money than everyone I knew. This was around 2010. I drove an M3. I knew promoters and different celebs and their agents. When Mayweather's people called my boss's people, I was often answering that call and making the appropriate arrangements to accommodate him. I was the shit. Until 2012. 2012 my boss says he needs me to do something different for a few months. If you don't know about Miami, the western edge is the fucking Everglades. It's the end of civilization as I knew it at the time. There is a large city called Homestead about 30 miles south of Miami. A decent portion of it is fucking ghetto, but a decent portion is farmland, obviously surrounding by the Everglades. My boss had a brother he always mentioned that was in, you guessed it, prison. He was about to be released but was going to be living in a halfway home near the Redland. For the next few months, I would be basically providing security for his brother. I asked my boss if his brother was a snitch and needed protection, because I was not down for that shit. He said no, he wanted someone to keep an eye on his brother. There was all sorts of legal bullshit my boss had to deal with, but basically he was able to convince the folks running the home to allow me to be on premises from midnight till 6 a.m. and keep an eye out. Really all I was doing was hanging out in my car from midnight till 6 and collecting a few $1,000s a week for my task. Chill, right? Just a disclaimer, I do not do drugs and alcohol. Drugs destroyed my mother and father, and I was always about staying 10 toes down, which was ghetto speak for saying I would never get caught on drugs by anyone trying to do harm to me. So when I first started seeing the shit I knew something was wrong. I heard a stone hit the back of my car and got out and saw a dark figure near the front of the house. I yelled my boss's brother's Cuban ass name, Yasiel? Or some shit. It just started walking toward the side of the home which was wooded. I contacted the security officer at the halfway home and the two of us went around to look for the figure. They did a head count inside the home and everyone was there. We couldn't find anything, and I walked back to my car. When I got to my car I literally shit myself. In my driver's seat there were 3 dead chickens and a fuck ton of blood. Instinct told me to call the police, but I called the security officer instead. When he came by he told me that I should probably burn my car and get a new one, and we began to check around the property once again. We spent the rest of the night walking around making sure no bullshit went on. 6 a.m. came and I went back to my car, drove to the ghetto with a security officer in his car, bought towels, put them in my seat so I didn't hear soaked in blood, and went to a car detailing place. I told my boss all this later that day when I went to lunch at the strip. A few days later, I saw the same figure, this time walking in front of my car, and began to drive toward it. That's a nice way of saying it. Having spent $500 and dealing with police officers explaining to them why there was a fuck ton of blood on my seat, I wanted to HT this bastard with my car. As I got close it disappeared. At this moment I knew I would quit after tonight, but it got worse. As I reversed back into the compound, I saw all the lights go on inside the house and the guards leaving the front yelling. I drove up to the house and asked what was going on.
We're missing 2 in the head count. Your boys, one of them, they just got out. We saw them 5 minutes ago.
Protocol is to contact police and stay in the home in order to secure the other folks there. I didn't have to follow it, so I grabbed my Glock and started looking around the backyard of the halfway home. I saw where they escaped from. They had smashed a window and just jumped out like that. One of them must have had a bit of glass on them since I could see a little trail going toward the Everglades where they ran toward. I walked to the edge of the backyard and saw the figure again. This time I could make out its features. It was terrifying. It was like a man painted in all black with the sharpest pair of red eyes I ever saw. It looked at me like it wanted me. At that moment, even in the darkness of the Florida Everglades, I could see his features. It was naked, and had pointy ears. It was bald. His skin wasn't black, it looked like mud when focuses more. I then just noped the fuck out if there and went inside the home. Inside in my boss's brother's room was an altar. A Santeria one. He had a dead crow and some cigars and some beads and shit. I don't know too much about what the fuck I was looking at. When I went back to my car, again, in the driver's seat, a headless chicken bleated all over my seat. I just sat on the blood, drove with the dead chicken in my car, and went home. I had a falling out with my boss afterward. He blamed me for his brother's escape. His brother was never found, but the guy he escaped with was apprehended. I don't know what he had to say. I don't care, quite frankly. I moved out of state soon after finding out I was under investigation along with my boss and some coworkers for various offenses, including the incidents at the halfway home where they thought I aided in their escape. I can't sleep anymore either. I've been on a decent dose of Xanax and Valium the past few years. I keep having nightmares about that night. But it's not just a scary dream. It's like the man is there, in my brain, making sure I stay awake to see his face.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more Greentext will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.